The words landed harder than any business failure he had ever survived. One sentence. One impossible deadline. One chance to change a life that had been falling apart for years. The attorney slowly closed the thick folder, looked directly into the eyes of the man sitting across the polished conference table, and quietly explained that the final condition of the inheritance was painfully simple. He had until Friday to prove he had a real family. Not employees. Not business partners. Not hired actors. A genuine family. Across the room, standing near the window with folded arms and eyes full of old resentment, was the only person who could help him. The cruel twist of fate was that she hated him more than anyone else in the city. Before this unforgettable story begins, if you believe kindness, forgiveness, and second chances can change lives, please like this video, leave a comment telling us where you're watching from, share this story with someone you care about, and subscribe to channel name. Your support helps these emotional stories reach people who need hope today. The bright Thursday morning sun poured through the glass walls of one of the city's tallest office buildings, but inside the law office everything felt strangely cold. Callum Rayner, 38 years old, sat motionless while the attorney explained the unusual final request left inside his grandfather's will. Callum had spent nearly 2 decades building one of the country's fastest-growing construction companies. His projects transformed skylines, created thousands of jobs, and earned him respect in the business world. Newspapers called him brilliant. Investors admired his determination. Very few people knew the truth. Success had come with a terrible price. While building his company, Callum slowly lost every meaningful relationship in his life. Long workdays replaced birthdays. Board meetings replaced family dinners. Promotions replaced friendships. He convinced himself there would always be time later. Later never came. His parents passed away within months of each other. His grandfather became the only family member who never stopped believing he could still become the man he was meant to be. Before his death, the elderly man quietly changed his will. The fortune worth nearly $150 million would not go to the richest grandson. It would go to the grandson who learned the true meaning of family. The attorney explained the final condition. Callum had until Friday evening to prove he had rebuilt genuine family relationships. If he failed, the inheritance would instead fund children's charities across the country. Callum wasn't upset about the money. He was devastated by what the condition revealed. His grandfather had known exactly how lonely he had become. As Callum walked out of the office into the warm daytime sunlight, memories followed him everywhere. Especially one memory. 5 years earlier, a neighborhood community center had stood directly where one of his largest developments would eventually rise. Although every legal requirement had been satisfied, dozens of local families lost a place they considered home. Among them was a young community art instructor named Maris Holloway. She had dedicated nearly 10 years to teaching free art classes for children whose parents couldn't afford expensive programs. When the center closed, her classroom disappeared. So did many children's only safe place after school. Maris never forgave Callum. To her, he represented everything wrong with wealth. Profits before people. Buildings before dreams. Callum never forgot the expression on her face the day the doors closed. Not because she yelled. Because she silently carried boxes of children's paintings to her old pickup truck while comforting crying students instead of herself. That memory stayed with him for years. Now fate seemed determined to bring them together again. The attorney investigating Callum's personal history had uncovered something unexpected. Although Callum had almost no remaining relatives, Maris had unknowingly become the closest person connected to the community his grandfather admired most. His grandfather often volunteered anonymously at her art center before it closed. He believed her kindness represented the kind of family values money could never purchase. The attorney arranged a meeting. Maris accepted only because she wanted answers that had remained buried for years. When she entered the office, nothing about her expression suggested forgiveness. She looked exactly as Callum remembered. Strong. Honest. Unafraid. The meeting lasted nearly 2 hours. Maris listened while the attorney explained the unusual requirement inside the will. She understood the legal situation. She also understood something deeper. Callum wasn't searching for a fake family. He was searching for the chance to become worthy of one. Even so, old wounds remained. She politely declined involvement. Helping him felt impossible. Callum accepted her decision without argument. He realized he had no right to ask anything from someone whose life he had once turned upside down. Days passed quickly. Friday drew closer. Instead of searching for shortcuts, Callum decided to spend the remaining time doing something his grandfather would have respected. He began visiting places connected to the people his company had unintentionally affected. Schools. Neighborhood parks. Small businesses forced to relocate. Community organizations. He listened far more than he spoke. Many conversations were uncomfortable. Some people expressed anger. Others quietly thanked him for eventually improving neglected neighborhoods. For the first time in years, Callum stopped defending himself. He simply listened. One sunny afternoon he discovered something that left him speechless. After losing the community center, Maris had continued teaching children. Without government funding. Without corporate sponsors. She held free daytime art classes beneath a public park pavilion every weekend. Parents brought folding chairs. Volunteers donated paint. Children laughed beneath bright blue skies while colorful drawings covered every picnic table. Nothing about the place looked expensive. Everything about it looked alive. Callum watched from a distance. He noticed Maris kneeling beside a little boy struggling to paint a butterfly. She patiently encouraged him until he smiled. Nearby, another volunteer quietly explained that many of these children came from single-parent families or households facing financial hardship. Art wasn't simply a hobby. It was healing. Something inside Callum began to change. The following weekend he returned. Not with photographers. Not with reporters. Not with a donation. He arrived carrying bottled water, folding tables, and boxes of art supplies purchased anonymously. He unloaded everything before most volunteers arrived. Then he quietly left. Maris eventually discovered who had donated the supplies. She remained skeptical. One generous gesture could not erase years of pain. Yet she couldn't ignore what she had witnessed. Callum kept returning. Sometimes he repaired broken benches. Sometimes he cleaned litter from the playground before families arrived. Other weekends he assembled bookshelves or fixed damaged storage cabinets. He never asked anyone to thank him. Children slowly became comfortable around him. One little girl proudly handed him a drawing of 4 stick figures holding hands beneath a bright yellow sun. Across the top she had written in uneven handwriting, "Every family starts with kindness." Callum stared at the picture for several long moments. Those simple words carried more wisdom than every business award displayed in his office. Late Thursday afternoon, exactly 1 day before the inheritance deadline, Maris finally approached him after the art class ended. For the first time in years, anger no longer filled her eyes. Only questions. She wondered whether people could truly change. Callum wasn't sure. He only knew he wanted to spend whatever years remained trying. Maris looked toward the children laughing across the park. Then back at the man she had spent years blaming. For the first time. She wasn't certain she hated him anymore. The golden Friday morning sunlight spread gently across the city, bringing warmth to the streets, but inside Callum Rayner's heart, uncertainty remained. The deadline his grandfather had left behind would expire before sunset. For the first time in 20 years, the billionaire builder wasn't thinking about contracts, profits, or investors. He was thinking about a little girl who had proudly handed him a drawing that read, every family starts with kindness." Those words echoed louder than any boardroom applause he had ever received. Callum arrived early at the park where Maris Holloway held her free weekend art classes. As always, she was already there, arranging paintbrushes and colorful paper while volunteers set up folding tables beneath the large oak trees. Children began arriving with excited smiles, their laughter filling the bright daytime air. Watching them reminded Callum of everything he had spent years overlooking. Success had built skyscrapers, but it had never built moments like these. Without saying much, he quietly joined the volunteers. He carried heavy boxes, repaired a loose picnic bench, helped parents unload supplies, and even tied balloons for the younger children. Nobody treated him like a billionaire. Nobody cared about his company. To them, he was simply another adult helping children smile. Maris observed him throughout the morning. She noticed the small things. When one shy little boy accidentally spilled an entire box of paint across the sidewalk, Callum knelt beside him instead of becoming frustrated. Together they cleaned the colorful mess while laughing, and before long several children joined in, turning the cleanup into a game instead of an embarrassment. Later, an elderly grandfather struggled to carry folding chairs from his truck. Before anyone asked, Callum hurried over and carried every chair himself. None of those actions were performed for attention. Most people didn't even notice. Maris did. By early afternoon the attorney handling the inheritance arrived quietly at the park. He stood at a respectful distance, observing everything without interrupting. He wasn't looking for paperwork. He wasn't counting signatures. He was looking for something impossible to fake. Genuine family. Not long afterward, unexpected trouble arrived. Dark smoke suddenly rose from a nearby food truck after an electrical malfunction ignited a small fire beneath its serving counter. Parents rushed to move children away while volunteers called emergency services. Without hesitation, Callum sprinted toward the truck. Years of Navy emergency response training from volunteer rescue programs after college came rushing back. He calmly shut off the electrical supply, grabbed a nearby fire extinguisher, and contained the flames before they could spread to the surrounding tents where dozens of children were gathered. Within minutes firefighters arrived and confirmed the danger had passed. Several frightened children burst into tears. Maris immediately began comforting them, but one little girl refused to stop crying until Callum gently handed her a freshly painted butterfly picture she had completed earlier that morning. Her tears slowly disappeared. The entire park broke into relieved applause. Callum smiled awkwardly. He had never enjoyed being the center of attention. As the afternoon continued, Maris walked beside him beneath the tree-lined pathway surrounding the park. For years she had believed he cared only about buildings. Now she had witnessed a man who instinctively protected strangers before thinking about himself. She quietly admitted something she never imagined saying. Perhaps she had judged only one chapter of his life. People sometimes deserved the chance to write another. Callum lowered his eyes. He admitted she hadn't been wrong about the past. Years earlier he truly had allowed ambition to become more important than people. Closing the community center remained one of his greatest regrets. He couldn't change that decision. But perhaps he could change what happened next. That afternoon he surprised everyone. Standing before parents, volunteers, and children, Callum announced that he had purchased the abandoned warehouse located only 3 blocks away. Instead of converting it into luxury offices as originally planned, he intended to renovate the entire building into a permanent community arts and learning center. The building would include classrooms, music studios, reading rooms, counseling services, and after-school programs. Every class would remain completely free. Then he turned toward Maris. He explained that if she accepted, he hoped she would become the center's director because nobody understood its purpose better than she did. The park fell silent. Maris couldn't speak. Years earlier she had watched one community center disappear. Now the same man responsible was offering to build something even greater. Not because the will demanded it. Because his heart had changed. She accepted with tears quietly filling her eyes. Children celebrated before the adults even understood what had happened. They hugged one another, cheered, and imagined colorful classrooms where they could create without worrying whether the doors would close again. As the sun slowly began descending across the bright afternoon sky, the attorney approached Callum carrying the familiar leather folder. He smiled warmly. The inheritance would be transferred exactly as Callum's grandfather had requested. Not because Callum had suddenly gathered relatives around a dining table, but because he had discovered what family truly meant. Family was built through love. Through sacrifice. Through showing up when people needed you most. His grandfather's final lesson had never been about money. It had always been about becoming the man worthy of receiving it. Months passed. Construction on the new community center began immediately. This time, however, every blueprint included conversations with teachers, parents, artists, volunteers, and neighborhood families. The building wasn't designed for investors. It was designed for children. Bright classrooms overlooked gardens. Large windows filled every room with natural daytime sunlight. Murals painted by local students decorated the walls before the grand opening. When the center officially welcomed its first visitors, hundreds of families gathered beneath blue skies to celebrate. The entrance displayed a simple bronze plaque. It carried no corporate logo. Only one sentence. The strongest foundations are built with kindness. Maris smiled every time she read those words. She knew they described far more than a building. They described the journey of a man who had once mistaken success for happiness. One afternoon, nearly a year later, Callum stood quietly watching children paint colorful landscapes inside the new center. Maris joined him near the doorway. Neither needed many words. Some friendships grow strongest through shared purpose rather than conversation. The resentment that had once separated them had been replaced by mutual respect, quiet admiration, and a partnership devoted to changing young lives. Neither knew exactly what the future would bring. But both understood something far more important. The future no longer had to be faced alone. Before we reach the ending, we'd love to hear from you. Please leave a comment with the words, "Kindness builds real families," if you believe forgiveness has the power to change lives. Your comments inspire others around the world. As the final rays of sunshine painted the community center in warm afternoon light, Callum looked around at laughing children, grateful parents, dedicated volunteers, and the woman who had once believed she would never forgive him. He realized his grandfather had left him something far greater than an inheritance. He had left him a second chance. Not to become wealthier, but to become better. The fortune built classrooms. Compassion built a family. The woman who once hated him never became part of his life because of money. She became part of it because she witnessed sincere change. And Callum finally understood that a family isn't defined by blood, legal papers, or last names. A family is created whenever people choose love over pride, forgiveness over resentment, and kindness over convenience. If this story touched your heart, please like this video, share it with someone who believes in second chances, leave a heartfelt comment, and subscribe to channel name. Your support helps us continue bringing emotional stories that remind the world that hope, forgiveness, and humanity still exist. Sometimes the greatest inheritance isn't money waiting inside a lawyer's office. Sometimes it's the opportunity to become the person you were always meant to be. And when kindness becomes the foundation of your life, you'll never have to search for a family again, because you'll already be surrounded by one.